reputation that has taken us years to earn, and we've reached, the heights of, I think, becoming the worst in the country.
Not all of the problems that Illinois and other states are facing right now can be traced to the Great Recession, but the precipitous drop in tax revenues did expose decades of financial irresponsibility, reckless spending, unrealistic benefit packages for public employees, and the use of political gimmicks to cover up hidden deficits. It's forcing state governors and the public to confront some harsh realities.
This is different, isn't it?
It's very different. And the reason it's different is because the only choices left are choices that people previously have said were politically impossible, that you couldn't do. You couldn't cut K-12 education funding. You couldn't do those things. You couldn't talk about pension and benefit reform for the public sector unions. That these were third rails of politics. We are now left with no alternatives.
Just the third rail.
Yeah, that's it. I'm just going to grab it and go and let the chips fall where they may. This money's got to come from someplace.
In some ways, Governor Chris Christie is the political canary in the coal mine of the state fiscal crisis. He slashed New Jersey's budget by 26%, including $1 billion in cuts to education, forcing the layoffs of thousands of teachers. He got rid of 1,300 state workers and drastically reduced funding to New Jersey's cities, counties, and villages, which have their own financial problems. And he's still facing another $10 billion deficit next year. Long term, the situation is much, much worse.
Okay, let's talk about the pension obligations.
Sure.
$46 billion unfunded liability for pensions, $66 billion unfunded for health care liability?
Yes, sir.
That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money even for the federal government.
That's a lot of money.
And there are people who think it's worse.
Yeah, I think that's an optimistic view. Listen, at this point, if it's worse, what's the difference? I mean, it's bad enough as it is, so what's the difference? I mean, now we're talking about money that none of us can really get our arms around.
And this is unsustainable, right?
Totally unsustainable. We have a benefit problem. It's not an income problem from the state. It's a benefit problem. And so we've got to change those benefits.
And what's the reaction then to that?
It depends on where you sit. I mean, I think the general public thinks, I can't believe anybody gets a pension anymore. I've got a 401k. It got killed in the stock market. I don't know what I'm going to do for my retirement. I can't believe people get a pension anymore. So I think amongst the broad general public, they've said, amen. And I think among the public sector unions, they're yelling and screaming.
And Christie is yelling back. He provoked a very public fight with the teachers' union, which is one of the most powerful political forces in the state of New Jersey.
And you're not compensating me for my education, and you're not compensating me for my experience.
Well, you know what? Then you don't have to do it.
It's a scene that is starting to play out all over the country.
Cuts, 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 and more cuts.
Governors of cash-strapped states are beginning to cajole or bully public employee unions into making concessions on what are considered to be gold-plated retirement and health care packages, which are now collectively underfunded to the tune of $1 trillion.
Some union leaders have suggested that you're running the state like Tony Soprano.
Well, that's, as an Italian-American, I take great offense to that. Listen, you know what it is? I'm the first person to expose them for what they've been doing to the public.
You want the public employee unions to share the pain?
You bet. I want them to share in the sacrifice. And this is what I say to public sector unions, listen, you can boo me now, but I'm the first governor who's walked into this room in 10 years and told you the truth. And here's the truth. If you don't partner with me to get this done, in 10 years you won't have a pension. And that's the truth.
But it's also the truth that some of the responsibility for New Jersey's pension woes lie at the doorstep of the governor's mansion. Christie and his predecessors have failed to contribute the state's share of its pension obligations in 13 of the last 17 years. One of the reasons the fund is going broke. Christie says it's ancient history.
We spent too much on everything. We spent too much. We spent money we didn't have. We borrowed money just crazily. The credit card's maxed out. And it's over. It's over. We now have to get to the business of climbing out of the hole. We've been digging it for a decade or more. We got to climb now. And our climbing's harder. We got to do it.
The problem with that, according to Wall Street analyst Meredith Whitney, is that no one really knows how deep the holes are. She and her staff spent 2 years and thousands of man-hours trying to analyze the financial condition of the 15 largest states. She wanted to find out if they would be able to pay back the money they borrowed, and what kind of a risk they pose to the $3 trillion municipal bond market, where state and local governments go to finance their schools, highways, and other projects.
How accurate is the financial information that's public on the states and municipalities?
The lack of transparency with the state disclosure is the worst I have ever seen. Ultimately, we have to use what's publicly available data, and a lot of it is as old as June 2008. So that's before the financial crisis hit in the fall of 2008.
Whitney believes the states will find a way to honor their debts, but she's afraid that some local governments, which depend on their state for a third of their revenues, will get squeezed as the states are forced to tighten their belts. She's convinced that some cities and counties will be unable to meet their obligations to municipal bondholders who finance their debt. Earlier this year, the state of Pennsylvania had to rescue the city of Harrisburg, its capital, from defaulting on hundreds of millions of dollars in debt for an incinerator project.
There's not a doubt in my mind that you will see a spate of municipal bond defaults.
How many is a spate?
You could see 50 sizable defaults, 50 to 100 sizable defaults, more. This will amount to hundreds of billions of dollars worth of defaults.
Municipal bonds have long been considered to be among the safest investments, bought by small investors saving for retirement and held in huge numbers by big banks. Even a few defaults could affect the entire market. Right now, the big bond rating agencies like Standard & Poor's and Moody's, who got everything wrong in the housing collapse, say there's no cause for concern, but Meredith Whitney doesn't believe it.
When individual investors look to people that are supposed to know better, they're patted on the head and told it's not something you need to worry about. When it would be something to worry about within the next 12 months.
12 months.
12 months.
No one is talking about it now, but the big test will come this spring. That's when $160 billion in federal stimulus money that's helped states and local governments limp through the Great Recession will run out. The states are going to need more cash and will almost certainly ask for another bailout. Only this time, there are no guarantees that Washington will ride to the rescue.